Good day. What's the role of the government in market design? Do you know? That's what we'll be talking about on this episode of Energy Explained. My name is Olajumoke Delano, your favorite energy lawyer, coming to you with another episode in the State Electricity Market series. In previous episodes, we had talked about how important it is to be deliberate and intentional about developing a state electricity market. Yeah, that's what we said. Check out the previous videos on this subject. We talked about market design. But what role is the government supposed to play? What role can the state government play in ensuring an efficient, state electricity market? And the first one is, of course, to ensure stability and in a way that investors, can recover their investments in a timely manner. So there are two things. Number one, recovery of investment. Number two, in a timely manner. Those two aspects are very important. The person who's going to put their money in the state electricity market wants to be able to know that they can recover the funds. They don't want to lose their investment. Number two, in a time frame that allows it to be a profitable venture. So those two issues are very important. And one of the ways that the state can do this is through the agency of the State Electricity Regulatory Commission that creates the tariff methodologies that an investor can look at. A methodology is just a method of calculating the tariff, the price that end users, whether large power users, industries, SMEs, businesses or individuals pay for electricity. So it's through the tariff you and I pay for the electricity, and it's plugged into the methodology that you'll be able to use to determine, whether, it's going to be a good investment for them or not. So that's one of the very important areas that, the government, can play a role. What about reducing investment risks for the investor with long-term direction on climate change? So it's important, because of the effects of climate change, on environments, especially even in Africa. It's important that the state has a policy. We've talked about what should be in your policy and plans of the government to address climate change, to invest in renewable energy is a key signal that a state government is willing to attract investments. Because if your policy does not say anything about renewable energy, does not address the issues of climate change, then an investor is going to be cautious, very cautious, and say, why would I want to invest my money here? And the interesting thing is that as of the last time I checked, there were about 15 states or more now who have indicated an interest in developing the state electricity markets. So there's something like a beauty pageant going on, because the investors will be looking at the different states in order to ensure which investment environment is most conducive and most aligned with their goals as investors. So it's important to have, return on investment in a reasonable time, policies that deal with climate change. And then what about incentives for the efficient use of resources and for investments in the states? What incentives is the state willing to offer to potential investors? And so I can recommend, for example, land. Land is one of the incentives that states, who are developing their electricity markets are considering, to put as an incentive, for those wanting to invest in generation, in the state, so that it eliminates that cost that can be their own form of subsidy that eventually reduces the eventual tariff, to the end user, and also makes the costs of getting to, generation commissioning dates faster and cheaper for the investor who is generating. So incentives are key. Other incentives could be, streamlined processes, for approvals, not giving investors the runaround, ensuring that, there's the environment, is conducive, there's a respect for laws, there's a sanctity of contracts, within the states. People honor contracts there, having a sound judicial system. All this creates an enabling environment, for an investor to want to come. The next thing I'll mention is very important. How do you appoint your regulators in the State Electricity Regulatory Commission? I delivered a paper at an event where they were opening up their state electricity market. I recommended that you should choose your regulators the same way you choose your doctors. It's clear that the electricity sector in Nigeria requires critical attention and requires serious intervention. Critical attention, serious intervention. And so, just like if a person requires critical medical attention, you would not go to your doctor and ask him where he's from. What state are you from? What party do you support? No, you won't do any of those things. You will look for the most competent person who is able to provide the required medical attention at the level of skill that is desired. You won't ask. So in appointing regulators for the commission, in appointing commissioners, you want to ensure that your regulators are independent. They are independent. There is no regulatory capture. They will look out for the best interests, of the states and the development of its electricity market. There must be transparent market rules. The regulators must be independent. The system operator, when they eventually come up in the market, must also be independent. The market rules must be transparent. They must be clear. They must be coherent. So if you are inviting people to come and put their money in, they shouldn't have to know the governor before they can invest, or know the regulator before they can invest. Somebody who does not know anybody should be able to come to your state. So you must set up a state electricity regulatory commission where your regulators are independent regulators. Another key role that the government can play in designing a market is the issue of price control. Price control is a big deal, and it sends conflicting signals. For example, you have a methodology that has been issued by the regulator that states that this is how tariffs will be computed, and these are the adjustables, these are the plugins that when there's a change in those variables, this is how the tariff will be adjusted. And then the government steps in and tries to manipulate, the price, the tariff. This is a red flag that will ensure that investors do not come to that kind of state. So price control, if the government wants to implement a subsidy, it should not be in a way that it impacts upon the ability to recover of people that have put their investments in that market based on the tariff methodologies that existed at the time of investment. So it must be a transparent environment, and there should be no price fixing or price control or other activities that distort, the market interventions. The other important role that the government can play is ensuring that the process of approving new electricity infrastructure is very efficient. In fact, some states in developing their licensing procedures and licensing regulations have put timelines. And a potential investor knows that if I put in my papers, I meet all the requirements, this is how much time it will take for me to get feedback from the regulator. I want to bring in my money here. Maybe I'm examining a couple of states and I want to know which one is the best fit. I know that if I put my application in state XYZ, then this is how long it would take for me to get a response and a feedback to know whether I ought to go somewhere else. So all forms of bureaucracy, delays, should be eliminated if a state really wants to attract investment. The processes for approving licenses should be very straightforward and very clear. And, available on the website. One of the things I commend the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, the national regulator, for doing, NERC, is that the website is so rich in content, and that you can be kept up to date on what is happening in the commission, even through that website. And so the processes for approving new infrastructure should be transparent, should be available for investors to be able to check on the State Electricity Regulatory Commission website in order to find out all the relevant information. So an enabling environment is critical, where there are smooth procedures for, requesting for permits, receipts are given, everything is transparent, timelines are open. They're clear that this is how long it will take for me to move from point A to point D. What are the incentives the government is going to offer? It's available. It's not something that is discussed behind closed doors. And the other thing that is important, in creating a market design and would influence, what kind of design is even the need for an integrated resource plan. One of the things that the state government should do is to develop an integrated resource plan for the state, which is a plan that, takes into consideration the demand of the state and the goal of the state, and also incorporates the expected time frame for the attainment of those goals, using the available resources within the state in order to optimize them, using a least cost, evaluation method to show the different scenarios, of how that state can arrive at its energy access goals within its desired time frame. And also, it also allows the state, to determine, what projects to do so that it's not at the mercy of unsolicited bids. The integrated resource plan would throw up a number of the costs for arriving at the goal of energy access, for example, by say 2030. It will throw up the cost and show the different energy mixes available in the state using different ratios that, okay, maybe we're going to use gas will be 50%, hydro will be 30, different sources of energy, solar will be 20, and, together we'll be able to close the energy access gap in 5 years. Or in 4 years. This is 2026, 2030 is in 4 years. In 4 years, this is the cost. And if the cost is too huge, then it can also replay another scenario, that's integrated resource planners. Okay, what if we spread it to 2035, which is in about 9 years? How much would it cost per year? What kind of investments are required? What are the areas where the investments are required? And this allows the state to develop an electrification plan and to know what kind of generation, what quantity and capacity of generation should be brought into the state. The government can play a massive role in creating an enabling environment for the market design through the different areas I've mentioned, stable and competitive investment framework that allows timely recovery of investment, reducing investment risks with a definite policy on climate change, creating incentives for the efficient use of resources and investments in the state. What about ensuring that there are independent regulators? No price fixing or price control. Implementing clear procedures for approving electricity infrastructure, creating an enabling environment, and of course, integrated resource planning. Have you learned something? Let me know in the comment section what kind of topics you would like me to talk about, even in the development of state electricity markets. I hope you learned something in this episode. My name is still Olajumoke Delano, your favorite energy lawyer, until I come your way again with another episode of Energy Explained. Take care. Bye.